Welcome to Movie World. I'm Andy Signor, and it's time for another sequel that almost happened. And this week we're talking about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4. Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, and Sam Raimi back behind the camera. This was to right the wrongs of Spider-Man 3. It was set for release in 2011. What was the movie going to be? Why did it fall apart? Let's break it all down. I've gone through a lot of articles, a lot of interviews to give you all the best of updated to today. Let's see what happened. All right, so the film, the first thing I could say I find about the film was here, an archive piece this is from Variety, I believe, from 2007. This came in through the archives. Sam Raimi may not helm Spider-Man 4, wants Electro, Vulture as villains if he does. So this was the first thing I could find where they really sort of broke down what he planned to do, and it seemingly was still in the works with Sam Raimi, but he was sort of cagey given what happened in Spidey 3. And this was his first post-Spidey 3 interview. He went out of his way to leave the door open for someone else to take the reins. Sony Pictures is going to have to make many more Spider-Man movies. Raimi told MTV News, "I just don't know what my future holds yet." He was there doing something for Los Angeles Film School with young filmmakers, and he said it's a great. He would like someone else to tell that. If I can find the right story that would work for me, that I could tell really well, I would like someone else to tell that story. He said of the already announced Spider-Man 4. Amending his statement, he said, "But if it's a great story and Sony will bring me back to the screen, I would love to." So he's sort of playing both ways of like, yeah, no, someone else do, but if I really like it and they like it, then I want to come do it. And as we go through this whole story, you'll see how that plays later. And so he ultimately also wanted to have Electro apparently on board. There was talk of bringing in Vulture. Maybe he said here directly, "I would love to see Electro, Vulture, maybe the Sinister Six as a team." Those three possibilities wouldn't necessarily cancel each other out since both are founding members of the Six. Soviet supervillain, he goes into Doc Ock, has already been there, Sandman, all the villains he's already had. Whether the storyline works out, Raimi hopes to finally reward Dylan Baker's patience with a villainous payoff similar to what Franco enjoyed in 3. "I love Dylan Baker as a person. I really like the character he is developing," the filmmaker said of the Dr. Kirk Connors. Parker's one-armed screen time challenge professor is in the first 3 flicks. "The Lizard is probably one of my favorite characters," he said of the baddie. Connors eventually becomes the Lizard in the comics and joins the Sinister Six when they became the Sinister 12. But Spider-Man 4 will probably have to start with the central journey of the main character to arrive at a proper villain. So there have been talks of this. There's been always talks about Dylan Baker playing the Lizard, but from everything I've gathered, it doesn't seem like that actually was what was happening in the film. So a couple other things, but this was basically sort of the first real evidence, if you go back to 2007, as to what was happening. And I want to give you all the pieces I could find to really put the history back together. The next article really comes in 2008 from MTV, another archive piece I could find, where he talks about the Spider-Man sequel and how they were going to shoot not just 1, but 3 Spider-Man movies, apparently. They were going to do 2 back-to-back, and they were going to work on 3 new Spider-Mans to begin with. And so here he was talking about bringing back Kirsten Dunst. "Kirsten, I'd love to work with her again," Raimi explained this to us this week, making it sound as if current plans to include Dunst for Spider-Man 4 and Spider-Man 5 are still up in the air. Apparently she was trying to get more money, despite recent statements that she wants to remain with the franchise. "I hope she'll be written into it. I couldn't imagine making one without her, and I think she's an important part of the movies." Raimi admitted the very nature of an episodic series requires the characters come and go. "I wish I could work with James Franco again, but his character died in the last one. Same with Uncle Ben. Fortunately, we've been able to bring back all the dead characters, like Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, Cliff Robertson as Ben Parker. I can't let them go in each episode, in each and every picture, but it gets harder and harder." Now things are about to get hard again for Raimi as he's making plans to continue the cinematic tale of Peter Parker. "I'm really excited about Spider-Man, and I'm hoping to direct it," he cautioned. "I don't have a script yet, but production would start probably by March of 2010. I'm guessing it sounds like a long time away, but we need a script first, and a lot of pre-production has to take place." Now remember, this is 2008, so this is like 2 years later was when the release date was supposed to be. And so he goes on to talk about that there is a lot of truth behind the rumors that he might shoot the next 2 Spider-Man films at the same time. Yes, that had been talked about, he said, deferring to the head of his studio. "It's Amy Pascal's decision. I don't think it has been decided yet, as she's the one who's really going to make that decision. I'm really curious myself." So here's is all very telling, because clearly Amy Pascal is who was in charge, and Sam Raimi seems like he's down, but then he didn't end up doing it. Why? We'll get there. His own admission, Spider-Man 3 was an exhaustive film to shoot, but Raimi's confident he can handle the double duty. It would be a real endurance test. Probably only Peter Jackson knows how hard something like that would be, he marveled, hinting that 4 and 5 would be very closely linked in storyline. If Tobey and me and all the producers liked the story for 2 pictures and Amy wanted to do it, then we would do it. It just hasn't been written yet. He also commented again that to finally let fans know that Dylan Baker's storyline came to finally let Dylan Baker's storyline come to fruition. He's a great actor, and I think one day the Lizard story will be told, he teased, referring to Baker's Kurt Connor's character. I don't know if it'll be this one or not. I just don't know. I'm definitely hoping to work with Dylan in the picture. I just don't know who the villain is yet. So again, deflecting, unsure where you would stick that. From everything I've heard, Lizard was not involved in the Raimi versions that he was getting far along with. But there you have it. There was a second MTV article where he talks about he couldn't do Kirsten Dunst without the film, and he talks about that they're only working on the 4th film. This really just echoes that he was still working on the script through all this time. This was a year later. Where he talks about the writers, producers, and I are working what the story will be, but we haven't been talking in terms of part 4 and 5. I've read that I've read about Spider-Man 5, but right now we're just working on the story for Spider-Man 4, just that one film. We're definitively talking about working from all the material in the comic books and nothing invented outside of that, Raimi continued. All the characters are villains. What we decide to do will be from Stan Lee's creations or those that came after him. He was very adamant about keeping it in the comic books. Note that twice in our interview, Raimi said villain or villains, plural, and said, I do have a pretty good idea, but I'm just not at liberty to say yet. Sony wants to be very careful to plan out how they announce the antagonists to fans. Well, Raimi and Kirsten Dunst both have expressed interest in returning as Mary Jane Watson. The filmmaker says he's currently unsure of her participation status, and he's not privy to those negotiations. Again, she was holding out for money. Dunst, if doesn't sign for whatever reason, they had other ways apparently to do it. I can't imagine making a Spider-Man movie without Kirsten, he said, seemingly contemplating the idea in his head for a long pause. Of course, it can be done because Spider-Man has existed without the character of Mary Jane, but she's one of my favorite parts, and it would be a shame not to have her in this picture. I'm hoping she'll be in it, and I'm planning on having a story with her in it. So again, he's sort of trying to, she's playing difficult. They're still trying to make this happen. So what ended up happening after that? So they announced the release date of May 6, 2011, and that inched long for a long time. And just to echo again that this was still happening, this was at August of 2009. They brought in James Vanderbilt to pen upcoming sequels, including 5 and 6. So he was there to bring both in, and so while they're working on everything else, they brought in Vanderbilt to work. And this is key because he ended up sort of being the reason why they were able to reboot it without Raimi, because he had been working on these other ideas in the meanwhile. So it sounds like Lizard and everything maybe was pushed out to another movie, and that's where we got Amazing Spider-Man, the reboot with Lizard, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to get to sort of what the movie would have been. The working title, the rumored working title, was Spider-Man 4, The Mysterious Vulture. And what's awesome is this Planet Henderson, what's his name? This is an artist here, Henderson. I forget his first name, but he's a storyboard artist, and he did reveal and unleash some of the storyboards from the film, which is pretty awesome when we get to look at them. And I'll scroll through a few of them by the end, but I want to tell you sort of the plan and reveal them as we go. The Mysterious Vulture means, yes, they were planning to have Vulture as the main villain in the film. And here's an amazing sort of sequence, fighting Spider-Man, throwing gargoyle heads at him with a jetpack, etc., to sort of keep the Vulture a major threat. And so he really had some exciting ideas for this character. Raimi is quoted, "The thing we kept coming back to was that the character was everyone was going to dismiss the Vulture as just an old guy in a silly green suit," Henderson said. "So we wanted to go the opposite way and really make him the most fearsome and formidable adversary that Spider-Man had faced in the series." And so who they wanted for this? Who were they looking to get? John Malkovich. Now, this would have been epic. John Malkovich, come on, back in Con Air, in the Line of Fire. If you guys haven't watched that Clint Eastwood film, highly recommend it. Malkovich is fantastic and would have been such a badass Vulture. And Malkovich confirmed this in a quote, because a lot of people said, well, no, Malkovich wasn't in. No, Malkovich was apparently in. In fact, Malkovich said this, "Well, I think of the people Here they are. Think of the people who sort of follow that genre. I'm not sure. I never really spoke with Sam about this, but I'm not sure. They may be kind of the fan base, the fanboys, either didn't approve of the Vulture as an adversary for Spidey to some extent, or maybe the studio didn't, or maybe that was totally unrelated to why it fell apart. Yes, I was disappointed because I like Sam, I like Tobey Maguire, and all that stuff, and the producers, two of whom I'd met before because I'd been offered Green Goblin on the first Spider-Man. Ooh, interesting. I came to like them, so sure, why not? But it didn't play out. So there he is confirming he didn't get to play Vulture in the film and actually wanted to. So who else was up for the role? Who else was going to be in this film? Well, the other big rumor was Anne Hathaway as Black Cat. So she was circling this role of Felicia Hardy, who is known as Black Cat, obviously in the comics. Julia Stiles and Rachel McAdams were apparently also considered for the part of this role. And Hathaway apparently at that point was getting a little bit more expensive. And since this role wasn't a massive role, they were sort of unsure, but from everything I've heard, she was on deck to be a part of the film. In fact, she mentions Sam Raimi mentions in an article of Vulture, I loved what she was doing with the auditions for Spider-Man 4, talking about Anne Hathaway, seemingly confirming that she was there auditioning. However, they weren't going to make her be Black Cat in the way we sort of knew Black Cat. So while Raimi is talking about always using everything from the comics, he was going to adapt Felicia Harding to be Vulture, the Vultress. The Vulture's daughter, as apparently from everything I've read seems very legit. It wasn't Black Cat as Black Cat. It was going to be, I guess, to separate her as Catwoman. They wanted to make her the Vultress, which I don't know if that would have been as cool, to be honest. But that was the plan, to make her be there. So she was up for it as well. She's been in everything I've read, everything I've done. Seems like Anne Hathaway was definitely going to be a part of this film. Ironic, since she didn't get this part, she ultimately went to Christopher Nolan and became Catwoman with Tom Hardy as Bane. But this would have been, we wouldn't have gotten that if she'd done it. Would that have been a good thing or a bad thing? Tell me your thoughts down below. But next up, Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell had been in multiple other cameos, supporting roles in the previous 3 Spider-Man film. And so he wanted to get, I'm looking for the quote, I promised him, Bruce Campbell, this is Sam Raimi talking, I promised him we would write something because I really love putting him in the pictures, and I promised him a good, meaty role. And so there have been all these speculations and stories out there that he would in fact play Mysterio. And not only would he play Mysterio, but there was a whole theory and thing out there that was going to basically justify how these 3 other characters were in the universe, was that he was playing them, paying attention to Peter Parker and following him his whole journey, which I always thought that would have been badass. Whoa, what a cool way to do a payoff with Bruce Campbell, as if like he had been paying attention all along and do that sort of reveal. I love it, but apparently that's false. Bruce Campbell was asked about this rumor, and he said, boy, that's really a popular rumor. That one is just, oh my God, what about Mysterio? Thanks for telling me, Internet. I never got a call from Sam going, if only I had done a part 4, you would have been Mysterio. No. So maybe they didn't talk about it. I don't know, but it does seem like he was going to be Mysterio. Now, the other way that they talk about this, while they jumped, a lot of people jumping to Mysterio, apparently the reality was it was going to be a different kind of scenario here. They were going to do sort of a opening montage. The storyboards sort of convey this. A montage of like C and D lister villains that they would have never really used as main antagonists in the films anyway. Mysterio, the Shocker, the Prowler, old school onesie wearing Rhino, and they were even talking maybe Stiltman. They were going to bring all these villains in sort of a montage of Spider-Man catching all these sort of lower tier villains, and then you can see in sort of the storyboards as we get to this point, they're all like sort of laughing as they bring them in. That being sort of the play here of, oh, see, these lower tier second-rate villains, and that would have been when we saw Bruce Campbell. But there's something cool there about if he actually it was all a trick and he really was a bad guy, I would have liked that, but I can't find anything to confirm it, and Bruce Campbell has denied it. So that's what we have so far. That's what's been sort of talk. Now, what happened to this film? We have these storyboards. We have these sort of amazing moments seeing here. A lot of the villain, man, this stuff looks awesome. Vulture really being the main bad, really wanting to do some cinematic stuff. Here's Vulture pulling down a helicopter, which would have been sick. A lot of amazing stuff here that, potential. But what ultimately happened? Why did the film fall apart? I love this one too, where they're shooting with machine guns in the air as Spidey's flying around. Really does have a more video game but cinematic approach. Beautiful stuff here. And here's some costume concepts. But in March 2013, Vulture asked Raimi what happened. And so he gave some quotes here. I want to make sure I give them up here as we go. This is Deadline on January 11, 2010 is when everything went to hell. This is when the press release was actually written, Deadline, back when Deadline was really good and actually had real scoops, Nikki Fink, etc. But they gave all their quotes as to what happened. Sam Raimi ultimately, these are all a bunch of Puff Pete's answers, but Sam Raimi did finally step up in 2013 talking to Vulture, the magazine, not the supervillain, about what happened. And he gives a pretty long quote here. I want to read it to you so you can, I think this is probably the best summary of it all. It really was the most amicable and undramatic of breakups. It was simply that we had a deadline and I couldn't get the story to work on a level that I wanted it to work. I was very unhappy with Spider-Man 3 and I wanted to make Spider-Man 4 to end on a very high note, the best Spider-Man of them all. But I couldn't get the script together in time due to my own failings, and I said to Sony, I don't want to make a movie that is less than great, so I think we shouldn't make this picture. Go ahead with your reboot, which you've been planning anyway. And former Sony chairman Amy Pascal said, thank you for not wasting the studio's money, and I appreciate your candor. So we left on the best of terms, both of us trying to do the best thing for fans, the good name of Spider-Man, and Sony Studios. Sony had already had Vanderbilt working on this reboot anyway, and so Raimi opted to leave the franchise and sort of left seemingly like a gentleman. And as you go through these statements from Pascal and everybody involved in the movie, they're not out there being mad, but the sources say, he was getting frustrated he couldn't make the date and they weren't pushing it, and so Matt Tolmack and Amy Pascal sort of really made a point, all right, fine, then they sort of agreed to do this. Now maybe Sam's being nicer in his statement, who knows? I'm sure there was some dismay. In fact, I know there was some dismay because Raimi then later admitted this was in, just so we have our dates, this was 2019, so it was a couple years ago, but Raimi has admitted that he's still haunted by this Spider-Man 4 that was never made. I think about it all the time, he admits. It's hard not to because each summer another Spider-Man film comes out. So when you have an unborn one, you can't help but think what might have been. But I try to focus on what will be and not look into the past. So that's what we have. And the storyboards here are really the best vision we have here of what could have been. Some beautiful, breathtaking imagery with Vulture, etc. And some cool ideas, some cool casting. I got to be honest, I really do like the idea of John Malkovich as Vulture. Michael Keaton did a fantastic job in Homecoming. I don't want to lie. He did do great, but I love me a good, scary John Malkovich. And seeing these visuals just looks like Raimi was on a mission to really, help the fans see something better, right? To fix the wrongs of Spider-Man 3, which had too many villains and a lot of problems. And I don't think all those problems were strictly Raimi's. So it's a sad we didn't get to get this vision. I didn't love the Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield series. I think we would have had a better off seeing this, but would we have had this lead into the Tom Holland and the MCU and everything else that happened? Maybe not. In some ways, while we had the ups and downs, everything's coming full circle. And what's very exciting is this idea that, Raimi could in fact be back to the Spider-Verse with Tobey Maguire. If you haven't been hearing my scoops over on Popcorn Planet, I implore you to go check them out. I won't spoil them here, but I will say it's very likely Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire might get a chance to redeem themselves and really do something epic and something big and something awesome inside the MCU. So stay tuned, folks. Lots more coming. That's what we got on Spider-Man 4. What do you think? Could this have been a good film, or would this ultimately not have been a great one? Do you think Sam was wise in backing off when he couldn't crack a story that just felt like everything else, that he wasn't happy enough? Was he being a perfectionist? What do you think? Should he just done it anyway? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. You can always hit me up on social media if you got a movie or other insight you want me to talk about in the world of movies, deep movie stuff. Let me know down below. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already done it to here on Movie World and Popcorn Planet. Hit that bell, smash that like button, and please leave a comment down below for the engagement. Thank you guys so much for watching. Movie talk, movie trivia, all for movie lovers. Thank you guys for watching here.